Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. This is your host, Christopher Anastasio. It is Saturday, May 14th, 2022, and this is episode 59. And welcome, guys. We have, sort of a very sort of like conceptual, philosophical episode that I want to get into today with you guys. So it's going to be very, very abstract, very high level, kind of the opposite of our episode that we published yesterday, which was a very granular, very sort of micro scale tactic that you can use on TikTok to get searched for and get found a little bit easier on TikTok. So you guys can go ahead and check that out. It was a fairly brief episode. It was like 7 to 8 minutes. But it was just something that I had come across in my dealing with and experimentation on TikTok. So I wanted to share it with you guys. So you can check that one out. Today's episode is really going to focus on this sort of conceptual philosophy of selling versus sort of, I would call it authenticating yourself, or really getting your customers, your clients or prospects to trust you. Okay, now if you go back to episodes 31 through 33, which we published in late January, early February, you'll see we have an entire series on know, like, and trust, parts 1, 2, and 3. So we literally did a trilogy there. Each episode, I broke down how do you get people to know you? How do you get people to like you? How do you get people to trust you? And in the process of traversing that sequence of gates, if you will, you end up in a situation where you gain customers. You've branded yourself. You've authenticated yourself. You've gained authority, brand authority, voice authority, whatever you want to call it, on your subject area, on your product, whatever it happens to be. And so you've essentially made a customer out of somebody, and you never tried to sell them anything. You never pitched them anything. You never presented them with a squeeze offer or whatever tactics you want to sort of trot out there. You didn't do any of that. You didn't have to do any of that because you went through the sequence of know, like, and trust. And so, on this episode, guys, it's kind of a rhetorical challenge to you to take a step back in your business and ask yourself, am I selling or am I authenticating, right? Am I selling to people? Am I literally coming out and asking them to buy in some way, shape, or form? Maybe I don't use those exact words. Maybe I say it in a really fancy way, or maybe I use a pressurized question and answer sequence to get there. But whatever the means or the tactics are that you're using, the question is, are you making a sale? Are you trying to get a sale? Are you trying to push someone into a closing? Right? Are you trying to close them out? ABC, always be closing, right? For all my Glenn Ross movie fans. So you got to ask yourself, are you doing that? Or are you constantly and consistently presenting yourself in an authoritative light? Shouldn't be hard to do, should come very organically, since you're talking about your business and you're talking about either your product and or your service, right? So you got to ask yourself, am I presenting that kind of information, that background that I have, that expertise that I have, in a manner, in a fashion that is devoid of sales language, is devoid of closes, is devoid of squeezes, and instead is simply putting myself and my business out into the marketplace and positioning myself as an authority. And so you say, well, Chris, it just can't be that simple. I can't just pump out all this content and talk about my area and the sales are just going to come. And I agree. I admit that if you do what I just said and you don't do it enough, you'll never make a single sale. In fact, you might as well go back to closing and squeezing and doing all those other things that I just mentioned, because then at least you'll get some sales. But here's the deal, guys. Think about, for 99.9% of the people listening to this podcast, you probably trust your parents, right? You probably trust them. I mean, like when you deal with them, when they talk to you, when they tell you something, you probably believe what they say. You probably believe that they have your best interest at heart, right? So I actually heard somebody, I think it was Sam Ovens, say this, but it may have been somebody else, and who knows, other people may have said it too. But he was saying, if it was Sam, he was saying, why do you trust your parents? You trust your parents because the number of impressions, and so what he was actually saying, impressions is a technical term that we use obviously in digital marketing. I brought it up on this podcast before, and it means literally the number of times you appear on somebody's screen. So literally the number of times your ad pops up, the number of times your organic content is presented to somebody, that's an impression, right? So he was basically saying, like, you trust your parents because of the thousands and thousands and thousands of impressions that you have from them, right? They were there in the morning when you woke up. They were there when you got home from school in the afternoon. They were there when you went to bed at night. They were there the next day. They were there the next holiday. They were there the next weekend. They were always there, right? So it's not some special magical formula that, according to Sam, that parents have, okay? And I think a lot of people would agree with this. It's because you show up all the time. You're always there. You're always the contact point for your children, at least in the early formative stages of their life. Now, eventually, obviously, they grow up and they leave and all that kind of stuff. But they're left behind with this impression, right? This global sort of impression of who you are to them as a parent and all the number of times that they interfaced with you and that they had dealings with you and they had interactions with you, right? So basically, when you think about this from a digital marketing perspective and marketing your business and your product and your service, and it goes back to all these other episodes that we've done about lots of content and lots of material being pumped out there. But think of it from this angle that I'm talking about on this podcast is that as you rack up impressions, as you start to appear before somebody often enough, they just start equating you with the thing you're talking about, right? So let's say you're talking about doing somebody's taxes. So you just start popping up left and right, talking about taxes and Form 1040s and Form 1120s and S corporations and C corporations and businesses and personal returns and tax deadlines and tax penalties and tax issues and IRS news and current event. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm kind of going through that laundry list on purpose because what I'm trying to drill into you guys is if you take this on with some vigor and you say, okay, I'm going to ditch the sales pitch, I'm going to ditch the sales language, and I'm merely going to put myself out in the marketplace in a very authoritative, repetitive light that I literally just keep pumping out there in every corner that I can possibly reach. If it's a Facebook post here, an Instagram ad there, a TikTok video there, a series of Twitter links over here, however you're doing it, whatever tactics you deploy, the point is, if you do it and you're repeating it and you're constantly at it, that accumulating number of impressions is going to lead to people trusting you. Let me repeat that. As you accumulate impressions, it is going to lead to people trusting you. And they are going to say, hey, Joe Smith, I trust this guy. Like everywhere I look, he's talking about taxes. He knows what he's talking about. He goes into detail. He's not faking it. You can't fake it that long. I mean, and maybe, just kind of stumbling across this as I talk to you guys, part of what's happening when you do all those impressions isn't just that you're convincing somebody you know what you're talking about. You're reducing the probability that you're faking it, right? I mean, maybe somebody could make 1 or 2 or 3 videos faking their knowledge about tax preparation. They can't fake 300. They can't fake 3,000, right? Eventually, you see somebody enough and you hear them talking about a subject enough, and you literally just deduce that they're not faking it. They're not fraudulent. They can't possibly keep it up that long and be fraudulent. So you got to think of it from both sides, guys. I mean, I don't want to be totally negative here, but you got to think of it as both positive and negative. So positive side, you're building up authority and you're building up your impressions and you're building up your trust factor by simply appearing authoritative over and over and over again. But at the same time, on the negative side of the scale, you're reducing the probability that anybody thinks you're a fraud. You're reducing the probability that anybody thinks you're faking the things you're talking about because you just can't fake it 827 times. Okay, so I just want to kind of pound that home with you guys because, again, we slice this topic up from numerous dimensions and directions, but it often just comes back to the same thing. Packaging what you know, packaging what you're great at, and pumping out content. And I just wanted to come at it from this angle with you guys because I wanted to contrast it to, I think, a pitfall a lot of people fall into. They think, I got to make sales, I got to generate revenue, I got to get cash in the door. And you do. I'm not trying to minimize that concern or that requirement. But as you're trying to do that, be very conscious that if you're out there with traditional sales tactics and squeezes and pressurization and all those types of tactics and methodologies that go around selling, you're not going to build the trust factor. You're probably going to make some sales because you're probably going to get some people who cave. if you can get them on the phone or you can get them into a sequence online or whatever, from one page to the next where they get, eventually give their credit card, you're going to get some people to do that. You're going to get some people to buy your product or your service. But you are not building a brand. You are not building authority. You are not building up impressions. And you are certainly not building a long-term sustainable trust factor. Okay? So just kind of wanted to hammer that home with you guys, get you thinking about it a little bit. I really, really, really encourage you, if this episode resonated with you, to go back to 31, 32, and 33, where I really kind of stretch this sequence out. We go into a lot of detail. We just kind of hammer it home. The first part of those episodes, 46 minutes. Part 2 is 33 minutes, and the part 3 is 42 minutes. So just to give you guys a sense, I mean, it's a lot of material. What's that, like almost 2 hours worth of content on the know, like, and trust sequence and how you can kind of deploy some tactics to traverse that sequence. But in this episode, really just want to hammer home to you guys that contrast between, am I using traditional sales language and tactics versus brand authority and authentication of who I am as a business person or as a business. Okay, guys, so I'm going to leave it there with you. I hope everybody's enjoying their weekend. Obviously, we'll be back next week with episodes 60 and 61. So super excited to get into the 60s as we churn our way towards 100 episodes. But hope everybody enjoyed this week's content. Like I said, episode 58, titled Get Found on TikTok. Quick little tactic there for you on TikTok. And then today, just want to get abstract with you about sales versus the trust factor. Okay, guys, once again, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, podcast. Check out Transform, Facebook, LinkedIn, transform.com on the website. Thanks again, guys. This is Chris Anastasio signing off, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.